Hi there, and welcome to CMBS 3030. Today is it's May 4th, and I'm Ann Hambly, the founder and CEO of First Service Solutions. I appreciate you attending, and I want to cover for you, as I will in all of these monthly 3030 calls, I'll cover with you some of the hottest topics in CMBS and anything newsworthy over the past 30 days, and I'm going to do it all in probably this will be less than 30 minutes. No reason to eat up time that's unnecessary. If you have any questions during the call here, you're welcome to type them in too. I'll try to take them as we go along. And also feel free to email me ever if you want to cover anything. But first of all, the hottest topic I think that everyone is facing that has CMBS debt is that most of the forbearance terms are now up. Almost all the forbearance terms that were received on the long end were 12 to 18 months of payment deferral, and all the relief was in the form of deferral. I think everyone knows that now. Nothing was forgiven, maybe some default interest and late fees, but I mean the payments were not forgiven. They all have to be paid back. So assume that you had a 12-month forbearance. Your payments now, your full payment is staring at you, well, it was last month. So, and even the ones that aren't officially documented yet, by the time they get documented, the terms are basically up. There's a number that are still in the documentation or the final approval stage. In fact, I pulled a report right before getting on this call, and there were about just over 600. In fact, our numbers are 601 forbearance documents were signed in 2020 for COVID relief, and about 500 right now are still in the process of final approval and being documented. So it's half and half. So you got about half of the people that requested COVID relief in April, May, or June of 2020 are still waiting on final approval for their terms and final documentation. I can attest to that because we're working on many of those, and I see it firsthand. The vast majority of those are hotels. There are some other deals, but mostly you have hotels. So now, sometime in 2021, most of them are staring at payments due, like I said, last month. Maybe you got an 18-month forbearance. Can't do the math easily in my head now, but your full payments will be due sometime in the fall of this year. And also, not only are you having to make a full payment, but you're going to have to start paying back the deferred amounts based on that, timing in your forbearance agreement. So, depending on, I was on a couple of calls earlier today, and I think there are various opinions I have heard on the recovery cycle for hotels. So, depending on the recovery cycle you subscribe to, and I think there are many, because nobody knows. This is futuristic planning. If only we all could do that, right? But depending on what you think is going to take for your hotel to recover completely from COVID, it's possible, or there's probably a great chance that you'll run out of your forbearance long before your hotel fully recovers. So that's the hottest topic. So what do you do? And I'm going to cover a couple of the options here and the things we're seeing in the marketplace, some of which might surprise you. That surprised me when we first started seeing them. So the first thing you think of that's easy is let's go back to the servicer and see if we can't get a little more deferral, or if we can't push out the at least the payback of the deferred amounts. What we're seeing here is we are seeing servicers maybe agree to another 3 months of deferral. And yes, maybe we'll kick out your payback of your deferred amount a little longer, but this is not something we can bank on. And we're not seeing them kick the can down the road, another whole year. And even if they would, let's just say they would, which I'm not saying that, but let's say they would, I think just there's probably, as an owner, you'd have to stop and say, do I really want to do that? Because I've created this bigger hole of a year of payments I got to pay back, and you've no doubt probably had to guarantee the repayment of those. But if you kick the can another year and you have to pay all that back, now you get 2 years worth of deferred payments that somehow have to be paid back. So I'm not sure economically it makes sense to get any more deferral. So deferrals, for the most part, again, are up. We're going to be up real soon. And again, you could potentially kick out your payback of your deferred amount, but not get another full year of forbearance. Think of some of the large conference hotels. We're working on one in New York, one in Chicago, and it's pretty clear that those are not going to recover fully by the end of their forbearance terms. So what does that allow you to do? Well, one of the things I think we're all now starting to think about is, all right, so kick the can down the road a year, let's call it, or 18 months. That wasn't enough. Okay, so now what am I going to look at? Well, one thing is you may actually need to modify the loan, not kick the can, defer, pay it all back, but actually modify the loan. And you could be looking at a full-blown modification of the debt at that point. It's more permanent in nature. It could be, you can have various forms of modifications, but some can be modifying your payments only. So maybe now you reduce your payments for the term of the deal. Maybe you defer part of the debt. And you might say, what the heck? That's called an A-B structure, but it's for loans where your property value is significantly underwater today, but likely will come back by maturity. So it's possible you could, sort of bifurcate that loan and pay some of it back at the end. You could, if you have a permanently impaired deal, we're starting to now see discounted payoffs. Now, that's the thing I think that you're probably all saying, what? If you weren't paying attention before, you probably will want to now on these discounted payoffs. So I'm going to get to those in a minute. And again, I would have, when we had this call a month ago, I would not have envisioned discounted payoffs being in the picture. And I'll tell you why in a minute here. But so let's stay on the modifications for a minute. So forbearance is up, your property's not recovered. One option is let's look at a more permanent modification of that loan. Now, modifications will require new capital. They always do. This is not a deferral. It's not a kick the can down the road. It's a true modification of your debt. So it requires new capital. They will charge a 1% fee because you're modifying, and that's in your documents. And it's going to be more painful. Painful meaning you got to put some skin in the game, and then again, it's permanent deferral. Oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean the word deferral. Permanent modification of your debt. So that is something that could be considered. There's various forms of, modification terms that can be looked at, and that would all depend on projections of your property, when you think it might recover, what are the shortfalls, what pool is it in, what is this controlling class representative willing to do or not do. There's a lot of factors. So I'm not saying across the board it's doable, but it's an option. So you could look at that. Now, let me talk to you about the discounted payoffs that we're starting to see. So we have some instances where we had, I'm going to use an example of Lake Charles, Louisiana. So pre-COVID, there was a clear overbuilding of Lake Charles limited service hotels. We had a number of borrowers approach us. This is, again, pre-COVID, nothing to do with COVID. And we approached the servicers with what seemed like the only resolution at the time, which is a discounted payoff of the asset. COVID hit, servicers all said, come back later. I'm dealing with really critically ill patients, using my emergency room analogy. So come back later. I can't deal with this now. We're not going to entertain a discounted payoff right now. Come back later. Well, those have now surfaced, and deals are actually getting done on those. So that's where the loan was not performing pre-COVID. COVID derailed or prolongated a resolution, but now it's something that can be considered. Another time they're considered is you have a property that performed well pre-COVID. And let's say that, so the couple prerequisites to consider a discounted payoff. The property value has to be less than the loan amount today. with zero, right, bad way to word it, but really solidly. It has to be below the value of the property. If you've got a servicer who has an appraisal that's below the debt, but they're getting broker feedback that the value's above the debt, you don't have a clear cut underwater property. So, but there are many times where it is clear cut. So where it's clear cut, property value is less than the loan. The servicers buy into that. And the servicer also would agree with you that the property value will not likely recover by the maturity date of the loan. Then you have a chance to do a discounted payoff. So in other words, if you have a loan that matures, hotel, I think primarily it's going to be hotel for what I'm describing, although I'll get to retail in a minute. You have a hotel, performed well pre-COVID, COVID hits, maturity date, and you're underwater today for an appraisal. Maturity date is in 2022, 2023, and it's clear, and this is the key, that the property won't recover completely to be above the debt by the maturity date. A discounted payoff can be considered today. This is kind of a new thing. It's not something we would have talked about again a few months ago. If you, however, have a loan maturity that's 2025 or 2024, not so clear, because how's the servicer going to be really comfortable that the property value won't increase by 2025? No one would bank on that at this point, not yet. So just know that in some situations, a discounted payoff is something that can be considered. Now, we are working on a pool, on a loan that's in a pool, I should say. We got two loans we're working on in the same pool. The controlling class representative recently, like in the last 30 days, changed hands to another entity. This new entity came right out and told the special servicer they would prefer to get paid off, even if it meant waiving defeasance, or even if it meant doing a discounted payoff, as opposed to kicking the can down the road. So that was really, really important. I think that's an important development. So if you have a loan that you think property that might be in the situation, we should talk about it. So I can pull the pool report and show you what's there. So full-blown modifications, one option. And just kind of recap where we're at. So your forbearance terms are pretty much going to be up soon, if they aren't already. You now are struggling with, what do I do then? Property's not recovered. You can do a permanent modification of the debt, potentially a discounted payoff. And a lot of borrowers are now, I'm seeing this more frequently, is they're choosing to bring in an outside capital source, preferred equity. I did air quotes like anybody could see that, but preferred equity as a solution to the problem. So it is a good solution. Oh, it's a great solution, and it's one that absolutely should be considered. Just be aware that it will almost always require servicer approval. I can't imagine they're not going to approve these. There's a lot of capital out here available for this kind of solution. I think it's a great solution to our problem. Plan on, 30 to 60 days of approval from the servicer, and plan on paying a 1% fee to do this, because you're changing the ownership structure, in essence, of your borrower. Now, there are borrowers who are coming to me saying, we're going to add this preferred equity, great solution, I need servicer consent. And when you look at the terms of the preferred equity, it's clear that it really, really, really is mezzanine debt. And I will tell you, mezzanine debt is going to be much harder to get approved in today's environment than true equity. So you really want to have true preferred equity. The equity, the way most of these preferred equity providers structure their deal, and I understand this, but for the most part, what I've seen so far and what I think they would structure it as is they would want, number one, to be notified if there's a default on your senior loan. So they want to be added into your documents as a notice person. They will want the chance to probably reinstate the senior loan if in fact you default on it. And they want to do that to protect their own investment. And that means at some point, there's a chance that they could be the borrower. If you do default, they step in, they probably have the right to step in and now be the main controlling borrower for the loan, which requires approval again by a servicer. And generally they want control rights over major decisions in the borrowing entity. And so for all those reasons, you've got to get their approval. Not getting their approval and doing this, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, but in my opinion, runs very, very, very close, dangerously close, if not right over the line of triggering recourse. So be really careful here. Again, great solution. Lots of money available to do this. It's just that it has to be done the right way, and you do need to get the servicer's approval. All right, so we've gone through a couple options. You can potentially kick down the road the repayment terms for your forbearance. You can potentially consider a modification, permanent modification of your loan. You could bring in outside equity, but it has to be approved. And another thing people are considering, I hate to see it, but I think it's out there, is selling the property. Maybe that's a solution, and I know some owners are considering that. So luckily it's a hot market to sell a property. Just know that because of interest rates right now, let me back up. All CMBS loans are locked out from prepayment. I assume all of you probably know that. So the two options when you're selling your property and there's CMBS debt is to either have the loan defeased, the buyer can find their own loan, or have the buyer assume the existing loan. Defeasance is pretty much almost always too expensive in today's environment, especially if you don't have a maturity in the next few months. So defeasance is likely not an option. That means the buyer has to come in and assume the existing loan. There's a fee for assuming the existing loan. So you're looking again at a 1-point fee. You also know then that the buyer has to be approved, and that's a process. It does take 60 to 90 days to get a new buyer in and approved on an assumption. And the bigger issue that we're going to have to focus on here now is loan to value. Okay, so if your value of your property at origination was 10 million, just using an example, and right now during COVID the appraisal or the purchase price ends up being 8 million, use a number, pick a number, the buyer's looking at maybe having to put up to 2 million in an LTV reserve, which they cannot use for the life of the deal. It is there as additional collateral, basically artificially lowers the LTV risk to the lender. That will kill a lot of sales and a lot of assumptions right now. So we're working with servicers to try to get that LTV issue removed, and we are very hopeful that that's what will happen. But that's something that we have to be aware of. So assumption, again, an option requires their approval, costs a fee, and will take some time. So let's recap your options. You got forbearance, terms are up. Again, you can modify your loan, permanent modification. You can maybe even possibly under certain exact circumstances do a discounted payoff, assuming you had access to the funds to do that. You could bring in outside capital. It's just that it's very important that it be structured right and that it be approved. You could sell the asset and someone could assume your debt. And that's all great, done every day. It's something that, again, you'd want to make sure buyer is prepared for, and you think through that process as early on as possible. And so those are really the options, other than, of course, self-funding. I always leave that one out, but of course you can fund all the shortfalls going forward. That I don't need to say that, and you would already know that. And yes, you can hand a property back, but I'm assuming like a deed in lieu or something. But I'm assuming for the most part, we're talking about assets here that were performing pre-COVID, probably will perform again in the future, and a borrower at this stage doesn't want to hand a property back for the most part. So I didn't even cover those two options. I told you I'd go back to, I mean, the flavor of what I've been talking about today is really hospitality focused. The reason is because that's what was hit immediately so drastically hard, right when COVID hit. Those are the ones that got the 12-month, 18-month deferral because there was just zero income pretty much for a lot of these. Retail deals, I'm very different, and as you notice, I'm lumping things together in a general category. So obviously within hospitality, there's many subtypes, and some will fare a lot better than others. Under retail, same, I'm just using a general rule of thumb. But if this retail deal, if your retail deal was hobbling along okay, COVID hit, kind of accelerated things, and now you're having trouble, and you don't necessarily think it's gonna, fix itself by the term of the deal. Retail deals would absolutely be right for permanent modifications, for discounted payoffs, and things like that based on future value. So retail, whole different animal. I don't think we've seen as much default in retail yet, but I certainly think it's coming in some areas with some types of retail. So that's kind of the summary. It's 2:23. I thank you again for joining today. I'm going to do this again every 30 days, 30 minutes or less. Someone just asked a question. The question is, and yeah, please type in questions if you have any. Have I seen modification fees below 1%? Yes, but I've seen 100 times. I've seen a lot more at 1%. But for a really large loan, or if you got a $100 million loan, it's possible to get it less. I've seen maybe 3/4 or 0.75% fee. Borrowers or servicers are not as flexible on those mod fees, though, as you can tell. And again, I'm talking about modification fees. They're not forbearance fees for COVID. COVID forbearance fees vary, and those are not consistently 1%. So I hope that makes sense. And any further questions from anybody here, let me know. That's the only question that's typed in right now. So I'll end the session today, and I look forward to seeing you all or hearing you all from you all before next month's 30/30. And if you have any questions or anything you want me to cover ahead of time, please share them with me. I'm doing this for your benefit, and I'd love to know what you would like to hear about. All right, thank you for attending today. Have a good day.